This is Bob Beckel,
This is Cal Thomas, a conservative who is pro-life,
a liberal who once worked for Jimmy Carter,
who favors smaller government,
who believes in big government.
and in a town full of cheap shot artists, I've never heard Cal take a cheap shot.
But even when he's wrong, he's likable. And this is Common Ground.
And this is Common Ground.
Welcome again to Common Ground, a video version of Bob Beckel's and my bi-weekly USA Today column in which we try to figure out how to bridge Washington's partisan divide. Well, Bob, the new Congress, everybody else is giving advice to them, Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, so why shouldn't we? Let's start with a character quality you find not at all in Washington, humility. You know, our friend Alan Simpson once said that he who travels the high road of humility in Washington will not be troubled by heavy traffic.
Yeah, boy, do I miss Simpson, I'll tell you. I tell you the one thing about humility is that it not only is it the right thing to do, it's also good politics. That's what these guys should understand, that the voters see in humility honesty, and, if you make a mistake, you own up to it. If you can't do what you said you were going to do, you say, I can't get it done. There's a lot of things about humility that is not, you don't look at it as meek. You look at it, I think, as a strength and as good politics.
Well, you've spent a lot of time in politics in this town, as I have. What about special interests? We hear a lot about them. These guys are coming to town, just like the previous group. We're going to be more upright and moral and righteous than the ones who are leaving. So what is the temptation that they need to avoid with the special interests?
Well, the first thing they got to understand is they're going to arrive in town, whether it's by plane, train, or automobile, and they're going to have all these arms outstretched from special interests, wrapping their arms around them, and at the same time taking their wallets out and giving them money. Special interests are dangerous for many reasons, not the least of which is that they often get you into some things that have nothing to do with your folks back home. My advice to them is, yeah, deal with special interests, but special interests have the impact on your state or district, and that way you're not going to have the temptation to take money for money's sake, and then you vote for something that has nothing to do with your district, and it comes back to haunt you.
That's very good advice. You know, something else you mentioned that has nothing to do with what you've been sent here to do is what I call the unholy trinity of politics: sex, money, and power. More people get in trouble over one or more of these things than anything else. So my advice would be, if you're a guy especially, bring your wife, bring your children to Washington. Let the people on your staff see you with your wife, holding hands, going out. Let them see your kids. Don't fall for this idea that somehow you are really powerful. You're here to be a servant of the people. You're being loaned power. It doesn't belong to you.
Hey, by the way, what was that? Who was the name of that stripper that jumped into the tidal basin?
Fannie Fox.
Fannie Fox.
With, Wilbur Mills.
Wilbur Mills. But with all
the Argentine firecracker.
That's right, the Argentine firecracker.
Not that I ever saw her.
I'm sure you didn't. No. Far be it from you to do that. But I'll tell you, as much as sex, it makes good stories, the rest of it, but it's money that is the most corrupting influence here. And if you look back at people like Duke Cunningham, who was the head of the Appropriations Committee in Defense, who was giving out defense contracts or putting defense systems into these bills in exchange for tangible goods. If you look at lobbyists who've gone to jail as a result of this stuff, you can get members of Congress. Nye from Ohio went to jail as a result of taking money inappropriately. Money is the source of all evil in this town, and we can call it the source of all evil in a lot of places, but it's particularly true in Washington. Be careful who you take money from and why.
Now, compromise is a word that we don't hear too often, except when the Democrats are out of power. Then, President Obama said, we won, so we get to basically do whatever we want, when he controlled both houses of Congress as well as the White House. But, my model for this is Ted Kennedy. I know you're going to be surprised at this. Ted, when he didn't have the votes, always got as much as he could and kept his objective in mind. There's a difference between compromise, I think, to move your agenda ahead and watering down your principles. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I'm glad it took you about 3/4 of the way through this session to get partisan. But look, if you look back at history, the most successful legislation has come when government has been split. If you look at No Child Left Behind with George Bush, whether you liked it or not, it was because Ted Kennedy and he sat down and worked it out. Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill saved Social Security. I'm not so sure this is such a bad thing. There are those coming in, the Tea Party crowd, that say no compromise, and Mitch McConnell, the minority leader of the Senate, saying our only job for the next 2 years is ensure Barack Obama doesn't get reelected. That's silly. If you want to do your job, people want them to do their job, and the polls tell us that. The polls tell us that people want you to compromise, not your principles, but at least be willing to sit down at the table on common ground. And that's something these people better learn, because it's going to cost them votes if they don't.
I'd advise them to stay off of airplanes, too, for the next couple of years, unless this travel is absolutely related to what you're doing. None of these 1-hour hearing and 12 hours on the golf course. I mean, people can see through that. It's very transparent. If you are serious about dealing with the serious issues like the deficit, the debt, the budget, the size and growth of government, and you're here putting your shoulder to the wheel and your ear to the ground, listening to the people back home, you're going to do a lot better than thinking that you need to go out to Andrews Air Force Base or fly first-class commercial to some exotic place and hold a phony hearing while you're playing golf the rest of the time.
You know, I'm sorry you raised that. I remember when I was in the White House, we went to Dubrovnik in Yugoslavia once,
Nice
and
place.
we had one meeting for an hour, and we spent 3 days on the beach. It was great. But you're right. You know, people are onto this sort of thing now. And but I will say this: there are people on the defense committees and the foreign policy committees that probably ought to get out. It's a complicated world out there, but if you're going to do it, make sure it's something you're going to learn from it. You're going to establish relationships with foreign leaders, something that you can bring back that's tangible, as opposed to bringing back antiques from some exotic place in Asia.
Well, finally, as we say in our column, this might sound corny in a very combative city like Washington, but I would advise, and I know you agree, when you come to Washington now, have a servant spirit. Realize you're serving your country. And by serving your country and sending this message back to the people who put you here with their votes, trusting you to represent them, you ultimately and best serve yourself.
Nobody could have said it better than that. I yield to my colleague on the right. Hey, check out our column in the paper and on USA Today's opinion website at opinion.usatoday.com. Thanks for tuning in, and come back again in 2 weeks for the next installment of Common Ground.